737, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Want to get right to the Newsmaker Hotline. Senator Bill Hagerty joining us. Senator, always a pleasure to have you on Nashville's Morning News. So much to get to. Want to jump right in. So one of the big news stories of the day, I haven't even gotten to the very latest, but that is the controversy regarding Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and the fact that he didn't tell the Biden administration that he had prostate cancer. He didn't tell the Biden administration that he was in the hospital out of pocket. Of course, his deputy was off vacationing in Puerto Rico. And I don't know which is worse, the fact that Lloyd Austin didn't really tell anybody or that nobody noticed.
You raise a good point that nobody noticed, but I've got to say this, Dan. First, I'm thankful that Secretary Austin is going to be okay. I think he just had complications from the surgery, but he's a four-star general. He's a responsible military leader. He certainly understands the chain of command. He certainly should understand the order of succession in the United States of America. Obviously, he's not undertaking his responsibility seriously when he doesn't even undertake to let his deputy know that she is now the acting Secretary of Defense at a time of war. Look, we have got war blazing in the Middle East. We've got war blazing in the Ukraine. The Middle East is attacking our own ships and attacking the Red Sea. While he was incapacitated, 8 attacks occurred on U.S. military in the Middle East. You've got the water boiling in Taiwan right now. With all of this going on, he takes it upon himself to try to hide this, to not let anybody know. His deputy secretary, Kath Hicks, is on vacation in Puerto Rico. Unknowingly is the acting Secretary of Defense. How irresponsible is this? And it just underscores the lack of competence, and frankly, it sheds light to our allies and to our adversaries that this is not a serious administration. It's just shocking. It's just a shame.
Well, one of the things that it clearly indicates that, yes, this is an administration in disarray. One of the things that I'm confused on is that you do have the defense secretary saying that he takes full responsibility for his actions. But I don't really know what that means. I mean, it seems to me like he ought to step down. It sounds to me like he's not going to face any kind of consequences at all. Corinne Jean-Pierre is out there saying that the president has full confidence in Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. It just sounds like nothing's going to happen.
Dan, it takes you back to the days of August of 2021 when they allowed Afghanistan to completely collapse without telling their allies, by cutting and running, and by leaving Afghanistan in a complete disarray with $8 billion worth of U.S. military equipment on the ground. Did Lloyd Austin take credit for that then? Did he take responsibility then? Absolutely not. They tried to pat themselves in the back and call it a success. It was one of the biggest failures we've ever seen in our lives. Everybody that served in Tennessee has told me that it is the most embarrassing thing that they can ever think of in their time of service. So I don't expect any type of responsibility to be shown by this administration. Joe Biden can't spell responsibility. But if Lloyd Austin really thinks deeply about this, he's the sole person responsible for this breach in the chain of command. He ought to be thinking very seriously about what that says to the people that report to him. What would he do to an underling, to a commander below him who went derelict in his duty for 4 or 5 days without telling anybody? Forget the medical excuse. And I wish the secretary well in terms of his personal health. But this is a matter of responsibility for the most powerful nation in the world and the most powerful position in our administration. For him to take it so lightly and not to inform anybody, and for him to have such a weak staff that they didn't know what to do. If that's incompetence, that's a detrimental statement anyway. And if it was intentional, it's even worse.
Yeah, I think he needs to step down. Let's move on. Senator Bill Hagerty joining us on WTN. $1.6 trillion spending bill. Basically, it's a top-line spending bill. And so essentially it's, okay, so here's the money. Now you guys figure out how to spend it. Now it looks like there's going to be, the headlines today, it looks like there's going to be some issues actually getting that passed. We know the House Freedom Caucus has some issues. What do you think is going to happen with this spending bill? Mitch McConnell is saying this morning that they may have to do a continuing resolution to get this whole thing done eventually.
I think what McConnell said this morning is just a reflection of the fact. Chuck Schumer has refused to put these bills on the floor. We passed out every one of the appropriations bills in July of last year. We put the first, what they call minibus package, but the first set of bills on the floor and passed them in the Senate the first day of November of last year. Schumer could have moved on to the next bucket of them the next day or that night. He's refused to do so. He hasn't put anything on the floor. Instead, he keeps putting these radical nominees on the floor of the Senate and avoiding the responsibility of actually moving through the appropriate process to vet, negotiate, and work through these bills. So what he's aiming us toward is something called an omnibus, which is what we all hate in America, a big 4,000-page bill that nobody has time to review or read, and try to force senators to walk the plank and vote for something that they can't stand for fear of avoiding a government shutdown. This is the way things play up here. It's something I think that the Republicans have been loud and clear. We don't want to see that again. To avoid it, though, I think a continuing resolution is a likely process that we'll go through. To extend it just a little bit further, to keep the doors and lights on while we doors open and lights on while we continue to negotiate with Schumer to get these bills on the floor, to actually negotiate them and try to amend and improve them at least. The top line is way too high. This is the product of the negotiation between Kevin McCarthy and the president. They tried to adjust it over in the House, but they've fallen back on the higher negotiated numbers. That's already infuriated many of us. At the same time, I think there's a desire to keep the government open, particularly given the consequences of a world at war. But we've got to be able to address this in a manner that's responsible. Schumer is acting anything but responsible right now, and a continuing resolution will maybe give us some breathing room to get this wrestled down in a better way.
It's so frustrating because part of what Kevin McCarthy wanted to do and Republicans wanted to do is have all of these appropriations passed, by themselves as standalones, or at least discussed as standalones, so that we didn't have the omnibus. And now it sounds like what we're being set up for, as you said, is another omnibus. But it just seems like, bottom line is, it's irresponsible. How long do you think this will take before we finally have a passed budget? And do you believe, from speaking to your friends on the Senate side, that we'll actually be able to get any kind of real cuts in this $1.6 trillion?
Well, so far they're talking about $16 billion worth of cuts, which, in the one hand, it's a move at least in the right direction, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to the overall amount of spending. What we all need to do is take a focus on what the funds are actually being spent upon. For example, there was original language in this bill that would have allowed the Biden administration to, quote, repurpose all of the funding for ICE and turn it into a resettlement agency here in America. We can't allow that to happen. We need to go through this with a fine-tooth comb. Yep. They're not presenting us with the opportunity to do it as yet. We're going to have to hold the line and say, no, I would much rather extend this and have the time to see it and work through it, rather than just sign off on something that we haven't had a chance to fully vet.
Senator Bill Hagerty joining us on 99.7 in Nashville's Morning News. So, Senator, we all know that the border is a complete and utter train wreck. Alejandro Mayorkas, his impeachment proceedings begin today. Number one, let's talk about what is going on the southern border. So Mexico finally starts helping us out in curbing illegal immigration, and so now it has slowed down. But, what do you think the future is for the border at this point?
Well, it's shocking to me that Mexico is coming to the table finally, but coming with great demands. They're trying to leverage the Biden administration to do all the things that Mexico wants in order to, quote, put controls on the border from the Mexican side. Mm-hmm. They want the Biden administration to flood billions of dollars into Latin America to support their friends and cronies. They want everything, every sanction, every control lifted off of Cuba. They want Venezuela to be, all sanctions to be lifted off of Venezuela. Basically, they want all criminality supported by America with funding and with a relief of sanctions as a condition for them to help stop the stem of this massive flow of illegal migration into our country. Who would have ever imagined that we would put a president like AMLO in Mexico in this position where he could leverage the administration of America? It's an embarrassment. It's shocking. All we need to do is enforce the laws that were on the books already. President Trump figured out how to do that. Yep. The Remain in Mexico laws remain on the books. He could come back today, and Biden could come back today and enforce the law on the books. He will not do it. The radical left in his party won't allow it. The only solution they seem to find is to throw more money at a problem and hand that money off to Latin America, to leaders in countries that don't have our best interests at heart. It's just a shame.
And the thing that's so frustrating, Senator, is the fact that Mexico allows all of that fentanyl to come across our southern border. The ingredients come from China. It's put together by the cartels in Mexico, and on it comes into America, killing over 100,000 Americans a year. So it's galling and repulsive that Mexico is making any demands on America.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dan. It's just shocking. And we will have 100,000 young people last year who will have died from fentanyl. We'll have 2,000 to 3,000 children in Tennessee who will have lost their lives. Sheriffs tell me the hardest thing they have to do is to call a mother or a grandmother and tell them that their son or grandson is not coming home because they've touched or somehow encountered fentanyl and died from it. And they're sending this poison into our country, into our state every single day without repercussion.
So what do you think about the Alejandro Mayorkas being impeached? I mean, I would assume you agree with me that he does deserve to be impeached.
Oh, he's certainly failed at his job. I had him testify in front of me, and he would deny the actual wording on the page that talked about their ability to reprogram all the funds to basically turn ICE, our only enforcement agency that can deport people, turn them into a resettlement agency. I put the piece of paper in front of every one of my colleagues. We all read it, and he denied what was on paper in black and white. It's just a joke to see him testify. He's a smart and clever person, and he obviously has very nefarious intent. Their goal is to flood America with people that are going to be moving to these sanctuary cities. These sanctuary cities, Dan, we've talked about this before, are located in blue states that are losing population. I'm talking about California, New York, Illinois. They're all losing populations to red states like ours. And what they're doing is they're backfilling that because the way the census works and the way it's counted, it's based on the number of people, not based on the number of citizens. And the number of people in a given state allows them to dictate how many congressional seats and, importantly, how many electoral votes that state gets. So let's say California is half illegal immigrants and half normal citizens. Well, the citizens in California basically get a double-up vote because those illegal migrants are giving them twice as many, are doubling their population count, giving them twice the vote that our people in Tennessee have without illegal immigrants.
Yep.
It's really an unfair issue. It's something that the Democrats are doing, and it gave them an advantage in 2016 of roughly plus 4 electoral votes. It could be as high as 7 or 8 electoral vote advantage that they otherwise wouldn't have because of this influx of illegal immigrants. It's a shame. It's obvious what they're doing, and it's devastating to our nation.
Senator Bill Hagerty, thank you for joining us here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Always great to have you in. And next time you're in Tennessee and you have some free time, would love for you to come down and for an in-person hour-long interview. I would absolutely love that because I always feel like when I talk to the senator that we leave so much on the table because our time is so compact here on Nashville's Morning News, but always appreciate when he comes on.